So we're really excited with what MetaMask has done, where essentially they have integrated our Decentraweb SDK and the Decentraweb stack into the MetaMask Unity SDK. So by default, any developer, any publisher, whether you're an indie publisher, whether you're a AAA studio, if you're using the MetaMask Unity SDK, you're going to have the ability to support and integrate Decentraweb style gamer tags and domains into your games.
Adam, welcome to the channel. It's great to have you here.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So let's start things off with an overview of your background, what you're up to before Decentraweb, maybe even a little bit of like what the experience that led you to creating Decentraweb and to know what you're doing when you're creating Decentraweb.
Sure. So I come from an open source and Linux background. I worked for Intel Corporation for nearly 7 years, doing quality assurance testing, mainly building automation scripts for primarily Linux, the Linux operating system. I was in the storage division, so we were testing storage controllers in Linux. Also did some Windows testing there as well. I did that, like I said, for 7 years. Kind of did my own thing for a couple of years, and then I started working at GoDaddy for nearly 3 years. I was a performance architect and a storage architect at GoDaddy, and it really gave me like a good insight and background, and really from like a corporate perspective and an infrastructure perspective, how domain names and how DNS and how the entire infrastructure really runs and operates. GoDaddy, has such a large percentage of domain names on the internet that are registered through them as a registrar that they actually control a large portion of DNS that traverses through their data centers as well.
Sounds pretty centralized.
Yes, it is very centralized. So I had my own businesses after GoDaddy for a couple of years, and I really got into blockchain in 2016. I was really interested in the Steam blockchain actually at that point in time, which was a centralized social network, and I actually forked Steam's blockchain and created a project called BravoCoin at the time, which was essentially like Yelp and TripAdvisor on blockchain, where you would earn tokens depending upon how popular your review was. So if people thumbs up your review because you had a good review, you earned tokens as a result. So I had that going for a couple of years. I was messing around with Ethereum at the time as well, but Ethereum really wasn't at the level where it is today. And then COVID hit, and I kind of had to shut down BravoCoin, and that kind of went under since all these businesses and restaurants and movies and everything was closed, so no one was leaving reviews. But I actually had the idea in November of 2019 on the way to World CryptoCon for Decentraweb. I was actually at the time traveling to World CryptoCon with my business partner at the time, my BravoCoin business partner at the time. We were on the road from Phoenix to Las Vegas. We were driving up. We had a booth at World CryptoCon, and we were talking about domain names and my work at GoDaddy. And I remember telling her that there were, that there wasn't a possibility for, like someone who, like a small mom and pop or an individual to register their own top level domain. Because we're talking about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had .bravocoin? And I said, you know what? I said, you just can't do that. Like ICANN doesn't allow it. It's a very arduous process to get a top level domain. It's super expensive because, I knew all about this from GoDaddy. I knew that it was like a $250,000 non-refundable application fee. And then it was like $10,000 plus a month for keeping it active that you had to pay them. And they actually rejected about 99.5% of the applications. So like, you just threw away this $250,000. So, unless you're like an Amazon, a Microsoft, or one of these big companies that has, that type of capital available to throw at something like this, you really weren't going for, you weren't going for this type of opportunity. So, we were starting to talk, and I said, you know what, this would be perfect to just run it on the Ethereum blockchain. Like, why is DNS, and domain names, why are they so centralized? Why are there gatekeepers there? And is there a way that we can potentially open it up? And that's really like when the light went off in my head, and I was like, wow, this is like actually like something that could really be done, and we can move DNS records onto the Ethereum blockchain. And that's essentially, my first idea for Decentraweb was born.
Yeah, when I found out about the cost to apply for a top level domain, I think it was over 250 when I was looking. I was like 280,000 or something like that. And then you deny all of them. Like, that's a good business model. How do we get into that?
it is, and unless you're not going to apply for something like that unless you're a multi-million dollar, even more than that, corporation. You just can't afford something like that. So really, and the internet was made to be this open network. But really, DNS is an architecture that was created in 1984, I believe it is, was when DNS first came out. And it really hasn't been updated since, and when they initially created DNS and they created these networks, I don't think they realized what it was going to become. And really, since the internet is so open, we really should have an open DNS and an open domain system and architecture and structure in place.
Completely agree. That's also why I joined the advisory board at Decentraweb. So I've got a whole bunch of questions. I want to jump into these from the community.
Sure.
We're going to be talking a lot about Web3 gaming throughout this. That's kind of going to be the big focus of Decentraweb in 2024, at least the first half of 2024 until we expand beyond it. So let's just start with the first question. What are your thoughts on the future of Web3 gaming?
I think Web3 gaming is going to be massive. I think we're in the infancy stages of it right now. Half the world right now identifies as gamers, but the world doesn't really realize how Web3 can actually help them from an ownership perspective. So, you have all these people that are playing games. They're downloading skins. They're downloading, DLC add-on packs and stuff like that. But if the game goes out of business, or they don't like the skin that they got or the character that they got, they can't do anything with it. There's no marketplace to buy and sell these things. So you're kind of at the discretion of the vendor, of what they're going to do with that add-on or with their game and their project. And there's so many times in history where people have like a super cool skin, or they get like crazy character in World of Warcraft or something like that. And you should have the opportunity to like sell these things, and it should just be an open marketplace. And I think once gamers, because a lot of gamers right now are heavily against NFTs, like traditional gamers. People who are in crypto, they understand like what this can do, but traditional gamers are very resistant to change. And this is like a big change, and they kind of just see like, oh, NFTs is like the scam JPEGs of monkeys and stuff like that. And I don't think they really understand of what you can do in like the marketplace that can open up for something like this. I used to collect baseball cards and basketball cards and sports cards when I was younger, and we used to love collecting these and going to like card shows and trading them and selling them. And it was like this huge marketplace, to buy and sell, all these different collectibles. And essentially, this is the same exact thing, except now you can do it with digital collectibles and in-game collectibles. And I think once the world and once the gaming community actually realizes how powerful this is and how awesome it is, it will really take off.
I think in a lot of ways, the traditional gaming community have really good reasons for hating NFTs, because the majority of them they were probably exposed to were indeed scams. But I think it's short-sighted to not see the tremendous value. So yeah, I completely agree there.
Yeah, I think you're gonna, there's gonna be a point where, and you're already starting to see it happen, where some of these major publishers jump into the Web3 game. Like all of a sudden, you have Sugartown, which is a game created by Take-Two Software. And they create Grand Theft Auto and all these other huge titles. They're kind of just like testing the water, dipping their toe in. And I think once people start to understand, and the gaming companies themselves understand, the opportunity that this provides gamers and users, and in addition, it provides amazing revenue opportunities for these companies as well, where they can start baking into the smart contracts perpetual royalties on subsequent sales.
Totally. And I think about like Fortnite. I mentioned Fortnite in one of my videos earlier in my channel, maybe back in 2020 or something, and how it had been around for 3 or 4 years, and they had already had $4 billion in sales. And it's a free to play game. That over $4 billion in sales, and it's just for cosmetics. And so, yeah, the people that are purchasing those should absolutely own them. I think we're pretty aligned on that. Let's go to the next question, though.
I just want to add one more thing to that. So what's interesting with the Fortnite thing, it's almost a similar paradigm shift to what we're doing right now with Web3 gaming. So when free-to-play games first came out, the industry was super against it. They're like, you're crazy. You're going to give a game away for free. What's the business model? There's no revenue. And I kind of feel like we're in like that same type of atmosphere now with Web3 gaming. They're like, what are you doing with the NFTs? Like, this isn't going to work. And really, you're going to have a major project or game or studio that's successful in this arena, and then everyone's going to jump on board. Just like what happened with like Fortnite and all these free-to-play games on mobile, where people are watching ads to pay for to pay for the game. The same thing's going to happen.
Totally. And free-to-play games make a lot more money than the ones that you pay to play. And it'll be the same thing for Web3 games. Okay, so moving on to, we've talked about some of the great things about Web3 gaming, but there's a big elephant in the room, and that is the poor user experience. So one of the ways that Decentraweb has tried to approach this is with gamer tags. And so the next question I have is, what do you see gamer tags looking like with Web3? Will we see studios have top-level domains and then users have Web3 domains, or we see users mint their own top-level domains, or how do you foresee it happening?
Sure. I envision two types of architectural setups here. I think you're going to have companies like Microsoft and Xbox, and they'll have like a .xbox top-level domain, and then they're going to allow the users to mint sub-level domains, so you can have like adam.xbox or josh.xbox or whatever, some gamertag.xbox. Then I also see actual gaming studios kind of doing the same thing for specific games, and maybe you'll have like adam.call of duty or josh.call of duty or something like that. So I think you're going to get down to like individualized games where you have wallets that are specific for that game, as well as wallets that are specific for the platform that you're playing on.
That makes sense, but how does that work out if you have a bunch of different gamer tags, but you have just the one wallet you're using?
So you can have forwarding, this goes back to DNS structure and DNS architecture. You can have forwarding domains and resolutions where multiple host names can actually resolve back to the same wallet. You can only have one reverse resolution where, a specific wallet address reverses back to a domain name.
So you can have whatever limitless number of domains or gamer tags, Web3 gamer tags that all point to the same wallet that you have. Basically, however you want to have it set up.
Correct.
Well, cool. The next question I've got is, and this is actually I'm curious about this, and this would be an interesting question, is what is the biggest challenge that you see in gaining mass adoption?
I think the biggest challenge in gaining mass adoption is actually getting all the big DNS providers and players on board and actually running Decentraweb resolvers. Right now, in order to access a Decentraweb domain, you need to enter in your own resolver into your browser or use a Web 2 to Web 3 domain forwarder. And that's good for people who are like technologically savvy. But for someone like my parents or people who aren't very technologically savvy, it just needs to work and resolve in the browser. So in order to get that type of adoption and that type of success, we need to have the major DNS providers like Google, like Cloudflare, like your ISPs, Cox, AT&T, so on and so forth. They need to start supporting Decentraweb domains and running Decentraweb resolvers themselves, in which they can actually earn Decentraweb tokens for doing so, or they need to point to Decentraweb resolvers in order to properly resolve these domains.
And that enables people to type in a Decentraweb domain in their browser. In their browser,
or actually, if it's at that level, at the DNS level, from your ISP or from a major DNS provider, it's not just your browser that would work. It would be any application that would work. Your operating system contacts your DNS server to figure out how to resolve any domain name. So whether it's in a web browser, whether it's in video chat, whether it's in email, anything, connecting through SSH to a Linux terminal or something like that, all of that would technically be supported if the DNS providers support it.
So let's say that is the case, and you can do that. What would it look like if you wanted to build and host a website on chain?
Sure. So it would really be kind of similar to how you currently build a website. You kind of have a couple of different options of building a website, a decentralized website right now, right? So you can have your hosting on IPFS, interplanetary file system, a decentralized file store, or you can put your website or your content on a traditional system, like something that runs like Nginx or Apache Webster or something like that, which is just an IP address, resolve. So then you would just edit your DNS records through the Decentraweb GUI, or command line if you're technically enabled in that sense, and just update your domain name to resolve to that specific IP address. So it really operates and functions like traditional Web 2 DNS. We're just moving it to the Web 3 world and having all these DNS records sit and stored on the Ethereum blockchain or on the Polygon blockchain.
So then the next question I have is how does the team decide what solutions to create with our DNS technology? How do you prioritize it?
Sure. So, we're trying to build products and services around Decentraweb's technology that we feel that users are going to use. That's why, we're heavily targeting Web3 gaming right now. We know gaming is really big. I also created a project called Chain Games, which is a Web3 gaming project. And personally, I've been speaking to gaming studios and developers, and I know that's a pain point for them, is that this whole wallet address resolution, it's convoluted and confusing, and they don't understand it, and users who aren't crypto savvy don't understand it, and it needs to get to the point where it's as easy to use as a domain name. It's like when the internet first came out, and you had to type in an IP address into your browser, and you had to try to remember this IP address. We're at that same stage right now in Web3 and in blockchain technology, where you have to remember these long, convoluted, blockchain wallet addresses, and to be able to convert that over into an easily readable and shareable domain name is really where we need to go. And the same thing happened again, with phones, and when the phone systems actually came out, people were, if you look above the number, it had a 3-letter corresponding code to it, and you can actually give those codes to people as well. So, all these systems, whether it's a phone system, the early internet, everything tends to move over to these types of naming resolution solutions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, to dealing with 42 character 0x alphanumeric address is a pain, especially for new people. It's like, okay, you want to send me some money. It's just way too convoluted and way too complicated. So I completely agree that it
needs to be as easy as like an email address or something like that, and people are familiar with that. So I think if you take, this DNS structure in this Web 2 world that people are familiar with, and then kind of transport it into the Web 3 world, that's how you're going to gain adoption.
Yeah, better user experience is something that is absolutely required for adoption. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
completely agree. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about, we mentioned having multiple gamer tags point to a single wallet. I wanted to kind of transition to discussing different chains. So Decentraweb's on Ethereum and Polygon. Can you do the same thing with a domain on Polygon and Ethereum? And if you cannot, then what is the difference between putting it on one chain versus the other?
Sure. So currently, we only allow wallet resolutions and wallet addresses to reverse and forward on Polygon. All DNS records. So if you wanted to host like a website or email or any other type of supported DNS record type, that needs to go on Ethereum. And the reason why we chose to do that is that Ethereum is the most secure and decentralized EVM chain, or Ethereum virtual machine compatible chain out there. And something as critical as DNS, we need to ensure that there won't be issues with censorship or attacks on different chains that that are easy to attack due to the validator setup or the way that they operate. So DNS is such a critical component in the infrastructure, the network infrastructure, that you really need to make sure it's as secure as possible. Not to mention you have some of these other smaller chains that go down where, all of a sudden, the chain isn't operational, or they had it like Solana, they had to reboot, their nodes, and the blockchain is offline for 6 hours. I mean, think about if you had a website and
more
you're
than
hosting
that
your DNS.
sometimes.
Yeah, more than that sometimes. Like think about if you have like a website, a critical website, you're a business, or a wallet address or something like that, and it's hosted on Solana, or you have their DNS records on the Solana blockchain, and all of a sudden the blockchain goes down, or you can't, in real time query these nodes. You can't have that with DNS. I mean, you need to have near 100% uptime, or the system isn't going to work.
Okay, so you have the more key DNS records can only be done on Polygon, but you can do name resolution, connect a domain to a wallet address and vice versa on Polygon as well. Another question I have is when are we going to do this with Avalanche, because they have a whole lot of gaming stuff that's going on, and maybe you could expand a little bit beyond that too. How do we decide which chains to add?
Sure. So, all the different EVM chains, it's really pretty trivial for us to port the technology over to them. The reason why we want to just stick with wallet addresses on these EVM chains, wallet address resolution, is that because we see the need, especially for like the Web3 gaming community. All these games, like you said, that are running on Avalanche or running on BSC or running on Polygon. That covers the majority of games that are running in this ecosystem. So we want to ensure that users can get native wallet address resolutions on those chains. Now, there's a possibility in the future, if we feel that these chains are secure enough and have good enough uptime and, are decentralized enough, that we would potentially consider, moving full DNS records to these chains as well.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So what makes Decentraweb an industry leading project when it comes to the technology? So what makes our technology stand out different from the other domain Web3 companies that are out there?
Sure. I think it's our approach and, actually going for top level domains. So you have some of our other competitors, such as like Unstoppable, that's only offering sub level domains. You have ENS, which is also only offering sub level domains. And even there's, a couple of other scattered projects that I know that are popping up. I think there's one on Base and there's one on Solana. And for some reason, they've all chosen to go like with this like sub level architecture. I don't think that's the way to go. I think, if we want to have Web3 DNS, we should kind of emulate and mimic what's going on with Web2, which is, have various different top level domains. It should be branded according to your business or your project or the individual. And that's the approach that we've taken, is that, we want this to be an open system where anyone can go, if it's available, you can register your own top level domain, you can register sub level domains, kind of like a first come, first served basis. Furthermore, some of these projects don't support the type of DNS records that we're supporting. So we are fully compatible with Web2 DNS architecture and structure and name server records. Other than some of the additional things we've added to it, such as wallet address resolutions. But aside from that, every other record type that exists in Web2 can exist in Web3 on the Decentraweb in the Decentraweb architecture.
That's a big difference, is because in most cases, if you're given a top level domain, then you can only get a subdomain. It's very different than being able to get your own top level domain. Essentially, it's a much broader foundation that people can build from, is what sets Decentraweb apart.
Exactly.
Cool. And then beyond that, let's talk, well, actually, while we're still on the topic of domains, the 1 character and 2 character top level domains are all reserved. Do you plan to release those? What's the plan with those?
I think that's going to eventually come down to a DAO vote. any two character domains that are currently ccTLDs, which are the country code top level domains, those are obviously going to be blocked. So you're not going to be able to get like a .us or a .ca or anything like that. There has been talk, to potentially release those. I know that those are going to be highly, highly valuable since, there's not that many of them. So if we do release it, we're going to definitely have to, notify the community, probably do some sort of DAO vote, and then do a fair launch so that anyone can get involved when it becomes live, as it's probably going to be like a free for all for them.
That's really interesting. Why not do an auction?
I mean, that's a possibility too. We would just, I think something like that, we definitely are going to need to get community input because that's a huge decision.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You brought up the DAO because, we are Decentraweb. Currently, the development team is the one that controls things. So I want to get your thoughts on what do you think about like the process of decentralizing and what that would look like.
Every project, every blockchain project, every crypto project, when it starts out, it's centralized. Even Bitcoin was centralized when it first came out. You had Satoshi that was mining the majority of blocks, and then other miners started to join in, and it gradually became more and more decentralized. And that's kind of the same methodology and implementation strategy that we take. So we know right now it's more centralized than we want it to be, but we're driving towards a decentralized future where more and more people can get involved, more and more people will run Decentraweb nodes, and eventually get to the point where the contracts will be 100% immutable. And if we want to actually do any upgrades, it's going to have to be a DAO vote, and kind of like the Uniswap model where we're just going to publish like a V2 or a V3 or something like that.
Okay, yeah. And that makes sense to take the things that are really key, like releasing the 1 and 2 character domains, waiting until that DAO is in control, because that's kind of a big decision for the team to make, whereas it's probably something that's better for the community to have a say in it.
Absolutely. We want to get to the point where this, the architecture and the infrastructure, and, we're very happy from an implementation standpoint that everything's, can kind of be like hands off, that we can sort of like withdraw ourselves and withdraw the team from continual updates and kind of hand it over to the community, hand it over to the DAO, to the point where really there shouldn't be that many more updates moving forward. But if there are updates, it would be immutable contracts that the DAO would vote on, and then they would be implemented.
I'm looking forward to seeing when that time comes. That'll be a really big thing to take what is DNS, which is currently just totally centralized, and see an actual decentralized protocol take over it. That'll be just an enormous change to happen for the internet.
Absolutely, an enormous feat.
Yeah, totally. Okay, next question I've got is, will you make the new emoji versions available to register as domains? So as they add new emojis, make it so that you can get domains of those.
Yeah, as those are released, and as Decentraweb is still currently, somewhat under our control, we will release contract upgrades to support those new emoji domains. But then this is going to fall into the same type of bucket, that we were just talking about, that once we get to the point where it's kind of hands off and these become, non-upgradable and just immutable contracts, we're going to have to do votes, through the DAO to do updates to support these types of emojis. But I can assume that, people love their emojis and they like all the new ones that are coming out. So I would think stuff like that is probably going to pass, and people are going to want to push it out so that they can get those domains.
I would think so. At the very least, like fit it into some existing contract upgrade that's going to be happening. Because that seems like something that's too small to justify an entire contract upgrade down the line. But if you could fit it in with some other big upgrade, that would make more sense to me. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, because when you do contract upgrades, there's not just dev costs involved, but you have security costs involved where you have to actually get everything re-audited, and that's a process. It's expensive. So we definitely want to avoid upgrading contracts or changing around contracts as much as possible, unless we have a lot of stuff to pack in, or it's an absolute necessity to do so.
Totally. Next thing I want to talk about is a big one. So this actually hasn't been announced publicly at the time of recording, but it will before this video goes out. So MetaMask has integrated Decentraweb's technology into their Unity SDK. What does that mean, and what does it mean for Decentraweb?
So that's huge news. We've been working with a lot of big companies in the background. We've kind of hinted at this in the past. People have been asking what we've been doing, but due to legal reasons, and NDAs, we can't share anything until it actually goes live. So we've been talking to MetaMask now for well over a year, actually. They've been testing our technology. We've been having regular meetings with them. They love what we're doing. MetaMask understands that the next billion users are going to come through gaming, and they're going to come through other avenues. And, like we were talking about previously, you really need to make that onboarding experience and the whole wallet address abstraction non-existent to the user. It just needs to work in the background. It needs to be what they're familiar with. So we're really excited with what MetaMask has done, where essentially they have integrated our Decentraweb SDK and the Decentraweb stack into the MetaMask Unity SDK. So by default, any developer, any publisher, whether you're an indie publisher, whether you're a AAA studio, if you're using the MetaMask Unity SDK, you're going to have the ability to support and integrate Decentraweb style gamer tags and domains into your games.
That's super awesome news. And I know the community members that we've already told about it have just been blown away by it. And it's a huge deal that we can finally talk about this. It's a part of everything that we've been working on and of what's to come.
Sure. This is step one. This is, the stepping stone. We dipped our toe in the water. We got our foot in the door at MetaMask. They wanted to support us via the Unity SDK and through Web3 gaming. So we think this is a fantastic opportunity, and we're going to push forward. And our end goal is to have full MetaMask support in all their applications, in the MetaMask wallet, and in non-gaming applications as well.
So it's a good step in that direction. So now that we're in a new year, what are you most excited about for 2024 for Decentraweb?
I'm super excited about this whole Web3 gaming integration. Web3 gaming is really gaining a lot of speed, a lot of traction in the market. There's all these new Web3 games that are coming out. You have all the major providers like Take-Two and some of the other big boys. They're talking about finally producing Web3 games, getting involved with NFTs. So I think Web3 gaming is going to be huge moving forward. And I think that's going to be one of the main narratives that you're actually going to hear in this upcoming cycle that we're about to go into.
I think that's a good way to think about it. I think I've heard from a lot of different people that gaming is going to be another major driver of this market cycle that we're just getting into.
Yeah, I definitely believe so. I mean, like you have in previous market cycles, you had different narratives. You had like the DeFi narrative and yield and farming and all those types of things. And for the most part, 99% of people have no clue what you're talking about and aren't interested in that, in those types of things. Gaming, like I said previously, gaming is huge. Half the world identifies as gamers. They understand gaming. And, if you can push this Web3 gaming narrative and kind of, open up the door for these next billion people to come on board, especially through, cheaper L2s like Polygon, like Base, and really reduce the cost and the complexities and enable wallet abstraction and different types of technologies like that, where, users feel like they're just signing up like a regular Web2 account. You're going to see a massive influx of people coming into this ecosystem. And that just benefits everyone, including Decentraweb.
Love it. Yeah, it's going to be an awesome year. Well, it's great to have you on the channel, Adam. I'm stoked to see where Decentraweb goes over this next year, and looking forward to having you back on here when we have more to discuss.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.